That camera on the back wall is a fixed camera. It can be moved during the week, and so Gene and Ron often play with that, and they say I'm supposed to stand right about here and stay put, or they're going to put an invisible fence on me. So just for that reason, I'm going to go over and talk about the coins there and the story today with Jesus and the questioning that he receives in the temple. And these, although you have to look a little hard, there's an image of one that looks a little bit like Lady Liberty on the back, and I'll reference that in the message today. Paul's simple greeting to the people in Thessalonica: grace to you and peace. It was an unlikely collaboration, if you will, that the Herodians and the Pharisees would come together and they would come to question Jesus. They didn't have too much in common. We know a lot about the Pharisees. The word Pharisee comes from a word that means separate, to separate themselves from the world, and so their worship would be pure and that they would keep the law perfectly and so on. So the Pharisees had very noble goals and desires. And Jesus, in fact, would have had a lot in common with the Pharisees. We almost always see them, it seems, in readings as an antagonistic relationship. But Jesus, about separating from the world and being in the world but not of the world and so on and so forth, and keeping the law, Jesus had a lot in common with the Pharisees. The other group mentioned today in the gospel reading is the Herodians. And we don't know a lot about the Herodians. They only get mentioned twice in the scriptures. But obviously take their name from King Herod. You know of King Herod at Jesus' birth and his son at Jesus' death. So Herod had a lot of authority and power. And you can imagine then that these are people supportive of Herod the king. But it also meant that they were collaborators with Rome. Because for Herod to rule, he had to toe the line. He had to do the Romans' bidding. Roman history is, you can see some of those coffee table books of Roman history and Roman ruins and things like that, and we think it was the most magnificent and the most glorious of ages. And in some ways it was. Rome ruled the world. And Rome accomplished some very, very impressive things. The roads, the aqueducts, the Colosseum, the soldiers, the military that they had. But Rome was also extremely vicious. And Rome came and crushed any opposition. Both the Pharisees and the Herodians were aware of that. The Herodians willingly paid their taxes. The Herodians willingly went along with Rome. And so that put them at odds with the Pharisees, who would have very much hoped and loved that Rome would be overthrown. So it's an unlikely partnership that greets Jesus in the temple. After he's cleansed the temple, he's been teaching in the temple. You can see that we're in the 22nd chapter of Matthew. So we are in those chapters dedicated to what we know is Holy Week. We know what's coming. Jesus knows what's coming, even if his disciples did not hear him and believe what he had been telling them. But here come the Herodians and the Pharisees, and they've got a trap question for Jesus. Our hardworking operations committee found themselves in a trap situation in the last couple of weeks. Back in the spring, they call from the other side of that lane back there, and they say, Zion, you own that lane back there. Would you trim those trees back and do some work out there? And so when we get around to doing that, and the group worked so hard to doing that, the next thing is there's a complaint about trimming the trees back too far and trimming individuals' trees. It's a can't-win situation kind of thing. And that's exactly what the Pharisees and the Herodians came together to do. They're rubbing their hands together, and they say, either way he answers this, we've got him. We've got him. So the question that they pose together after they've flattered Jesus a little bit, we know that you show differentiality to people or deference to people, and you honor all people as the same, and so on. So tell us, is it lawful to pay taxes to the emperor? If Jesus says yes, then he is with the Herodians. He has sided with them. If Jesus says no, he has sided with the Pharisees and then also put himself at great risk with Rome. Nobody can envision a different answer except Jesus. And Jesus, in his wisdom, says to the people, he says, all right, take out a coin. And they pull out one of those coins, a denarius up here, that is shown. And he says, whose image is on that coin? And they say the emperor's. It's interesting that they are already collaborating, as we obviously find ourselves. What are our alternatives? I suppose we can barter, or I suppose we could use bitcoins or something in cryptocurrency these days. But we have to use the money that is used issued by the government and used in all business transactions and so on. We have to follow the rules and the laws as citizens of this country, as do citizens of every country. But it's interesting that they are able already to pull out a Roman coin. They are already acknowledging, well, we're in this. We are collaborators in a sense of necessity with Rome. Whose image is on the coin? The emperor. And on the back side of the coin is a lady that looks like Lady Liberty on our old half dollars that go back quite a ways. And she is indicating that Caesar is the high priest. She is one of the temple worshipers, or the temple, eventually in Rome comes to be temple prostitutes. But she is indicating that the emperor serves as God. The emperor is God. He is the high priest. So there's that loyalty question coming into play already. It comes into play in, frankly, the display in most churches and most buildings. We have the American flag. We are citizens of this country. There are 208 or 210 countries around the world, and they all have their flags. On the other hand, there is the Christian church flag, which can be found in any country around the world among Christians. And the loyalties that we have, it's not just the Herodians and the Pharisees that Jesus comes back to address. When shown the coin, he says, render unto Caesar, or render unto the emperor, the things that are the emperor's, and unto God the things that are God's. Great wisdom, challenge for all of us, something that we need to address, something that we need to figure out for ourselves. Where do we stand? Martin Luther had great things to say about government. Government given to us by God for our good, for keeping order, for peace, for providing for the needs of others, and so on. But when government fails, or when government is unjust, where do we go at that point? The Herodians and the Pharisees both thought they had Jesus. One way or the other, we're going to get him. And he comes back with that amazing wisdom. Render unto Caesar. Yes, you and I have to pay our taxes. Yes, you and I have obligations, and voting is one of those both blessings and obligations. Exercise that in coming weeks. We also have obligations, as Jesus reminds us, his kingdom is not of this world. And he is in the world, but not of the world. And he says that about us as well. And he says our ultimate citizenship is in heaven. That is eternal. That's what supersedes all of our geopolitical boundaries and all of our different flags and all of our different national settings, nationalities and ethnicity and so on. Render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's, that we should appropriately offer as citizens. And unto God, what did it say about God in the psalm? It said about God in the psalm that he is not an idol like the Roman emperor, but in fact that God is the one who has created the heavens and the earth, and God who in Jesus Christ has redeemed us. Render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's. Render unto Washington or Columbus or however you want it to the county. But unto God the things that are God's. Remember, Rome seemed so impressive and accomplished many great things. It was hardly a friendly place for Christians until the 4th century with Constantine, when Constantine made Christianity the religion of the land. That changed everything. No longer is Caesar God. No longer is he the high priest in the temple. But Jesus is our great high priest. And beginning with Constantine and then the Holy Roman Empire, Jesus is our great high priest. Render unto Caesar. They thought they had him, and he got them. They were amazed at his wisdom. They asked him no more questions. And those collaborators, those Herodians and Pharisees with Sadducees and scribes and temple police and everything and everybody else would come together to put him to death. Crushed under Roman rule, crushed under Pontius Pilate, the official there, and Herod was complicit in that too. Jesus stood before both of them, and he said, "My kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my followers would fight for me, but my kingdom is not of this world." So, when in Rome was the old expression, do like the Romans do. I remember when we visited the Netherlands when our son was a foreign exchange student for a year, and after about the 4th or 5th day, he was probably getting tired of showing us around, and he said, "You act like tourists." And we said, "We are. We were tourists." He didn't think we blended in well enough to look like he who had now 8, 9, 10 months of experience in the Netherlands. He was almost a native by then. Nonetheless, when in Rome, do like the Romans. When in God's kingdom, do the work of the kingdom and render unto God the things that are God's. Amen.